Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Bob Venero. He's the president and CEO of Future Tech Enterprise. Bob, good to have you with us.
Great to be here. Thank you.
And maybe just tell us a little bit about the history of the company. You've been in this market now for more than a quarter century. Tell us the evolution, what you've seen in the market over those years.
Yeah, I didn't think about quarter century. Thanks for making me feel old, Tom. That's all right. It's all good. A great American story, as I try to tell folks, right? I started the company in the basement of the house 27 years ago. Credit card and a prayer, and then some more credit cards and some more prayers, and then a combination of the both. And it's been an incredible journey for us over the years. From where we were, to where we are to here. And that journey along the way has been really good for us and our customers. Excited to be here finally. There was a statistic the other day that we heard, which was only 12% of the private companies in America make it past 26 years. So good milestone for us.
Yes, it's a good thing you didn't go into the restaurant business because those fail even
Yeah.
more frequently.
I actually did that during the pandemic. It didn't work. So back into tech now.
Pastrami on rye is not your thing. All right, good.
Yeah.
And let's talk about federal agencies and their cloud migration journeys. Early on, the strategy, as stated explicitly by the initiating administration there, was cloud first. But that's risky that you found, and maybe discuss what the risks are in there and what might be a better alternate strategy.
Yeah, cloud is an interesting one. Cloud's been around before it was cloud, right? It was just called a mainframe with a green screen, right? And data was off in some main section, and people accessed it through connectivity, either over direct lines or the internet at the time, right? But cloud has obviously evolved. When you look at cloud first, for us, cloud first doesn't mean and shouldn't mean, right, that you just do it regardless of what the risk is. There's a lot of organizations that have taken that mentality of cloud first without really taking a step back and looking about the risk versus reward, right? The future risks that are out there, not only to their business, right, but to the data that is kept within there. We've all seen outages and downtimes and data loss and data leakage, right? And a lot of that is tied to the cloud, right? What is there. So we're very firm on a hybrid approach, right? Taking a hybrid approach for cloud for organizations, making sure that you're looking at what is that data that if it was compromised or lost out there, what would be the minimal impact for your organization? And then make that decision to be able to bring that data into the cloud and or those applications in the cloud, because it's also ties to productivity, right? When you are in the cloud and your applications and your data is in the cloud, and that's the only place you can get it, and then it's down or your connectivity is down, you cease to work. And what does that mean from a productivity standpoint? And so these are all of the risk analysis items that companies should do, and we help them do that, right, prior to them making that journey into the cloud and deciding which way.
And before we get to some of the virtues and some of the strategies for hybrid and data center, I wanted to just pull on the thread a little bit of that idea that clouds maybe are not quite the security and safety and fortress-like structures that they are often advertised or touted to be.
Yeah, look, I don't want to say that they're not. They're secure to the level that they can be, right? But you don't have the right walls around them that I would consider. You've got physical security, you've got structural security, you've got data security, and each one of those brings its own inherent risks, right? You have seen where there are individuals that are not your employees that work on your data in a cloud that don't have that allegiance to your company or your organization. That puts you at risk and your data at risk. You have bad actors, right, that go after the large cloud providers, right, versus the individual smaller companies. And that's another risk that you have to take a look at, right? So if I'm a hacker and I want to go after, right, data I'm not going to go to a small company's pool because that's small potatoes for me. I'm going to go to somebody like AWS or Azure or Google, and I'm going to try to attack that threat vector because I'm going to get more out of that than I am right from the smaller organization. It's just like, someone who wants to go to rob a house. If there's not a lot of valuables in the house, why are you going to go there? Now you go to an apartment complex where they're all millionaires, you're probably going to get a good haul, right? So your juice is worth more of that squeeze in that bigger environment than it is going for the individual, if you
Sure.
understand. Yeah.
Yep. And one of the original impetuses for the cloud first, now cloud smart strategy was specifically the reduction of federal data centers because of redundancy and cost and so on. But yet there are advantages to data centers in your view. Tell us why agencies should not necessarily get rid of all their own in-house on-prem facilities and what some of the advantages that remain are.
Yeah. Look, a lot of times folks look at cloud as a cost saving or cost reduction initiative. And I think over time they've realized that that may not always be the case, right? Where cloud first wasn't always about security and protection, right? It was about reducing your footprint in a data center, reducing the number of headcount in support, right, of those applications and that data. And I think what they've learned with a lot of the, egress of data back and forth, that cost doesn't necessarily with cloud mean lower, right? And so if you do have your own data center and you can take a cost model that is cloud-esque and put that into that data center, then you can get the best of all worlds because you've got your own walls that you're protecting, your own lines that are there. You're not worrying about somebody cutting a pipe in Wichita, Kansas, right, to get to your data, right, that limits now you getting access to your data because of an outage. And the major OEMs have jumped on this, right? Dell, Hewlett Packard, right? All of these companies are now supplying, flexibility on demand, right? FOD and or consumption on demand, and giving that cloud-like service, but in a on-prem environment. And then if your world is about reducing cost or the perception of reducing cost, you can now do that in a flexible environment. And we do a lot of that work right now with it, which is what we call flex on demand.
Right. So then, yes, data centers, on-prem facilities have their requirements and virtues, but it sounds like they need to be modernized and brought up architecturally, perhaps, and technically so that they operate similar to the cloud. So your hybrid environment is more unified.
Well, yeah, you need to modernize them, right? That's not a question, right? So you have to modernize them, but you can do that in a way that's not capital intensive, right? Capital is king right now. Cash is king, I should say, right? And organizations are really looking to move from CapEx expenditures to OpEx expenditures, right? And you can create an OpEx environment in a data center that'll allow you to modernize it, bring you to a more, we'll call it secure cyber environment for a utilization cost and an OpEx cost versus having to spend tens of millions of dollars in infrastructure.
Well, tell us what some of those methodologies are. I imagine software defined networking and other software defined technologies might be one route to that OpEx type of model where you can use the same hardware over and over.
Well, yeah, and it's not only the software, right, as a service, if you want to call it, or device as a service, and or network, right, software defined networking and such. It's also the infrastructure, the hardware, right, that you need that's modern, that has the capabilities to take advantage of the security requirements, right, that are there. But again, if we talk about price, it's how do you consume that hardware and that software and that technology, right? And that's what we're moving to when we talk flex on demand and moving to OpEx is the ability to give you that cloud experience, right? And doing it, I would call it by the drink, right? Versus in a capital intensive, right, environment. So the technology helps to drive that, right? VxRail, right? VMware, the Dell solutions, the storage defined environments and networking, and even PC as a service now, right? Which goes beyond the data center, but ties to the edge.
Yes, so that even the individual workstation becomes a cloud hosted or data center hosted service.
Or it's not hosted, it's just paid for in an OpEx environment, right? Because that's the
Right.
delineation you have to see. If cost is a driver, right, there is still inherent risk of having a thin client device that is cloud delivered, right? But if I can give you that device that is a standard device, but you pay for it in a consumption based model, in an OpEx, I can eliminate your risk, right? So let's take a look at thin client. If thin client is not connected to a data center or the internet, what is the value of a thin client? It's a brick, right? It's a dumb
Sure.
device. Now, if I can give you that same type of experience in a thick client, but you're paying on demand for that, and or you're paying as a service for that, then if there's an outage and you're not connected, you still have the capabilities of being productive, right? In that environment. You also limit your threat vector and risk vector by having individual assets versus everything hosted on one machine, right? Because if you lose that one machine, you lose then everything that's connected to that machine versus an individual unit. So there's a lot of nuances of risk, right, that are associated with a cloud first or cloud only strategy that you see out in the market.
And in that business model where you are charging as if it's a cloud service for some of these things like thick client, how does that get transplanted as a business model into an organization like a federal agency, which might be set up entirely differently to begin with?
Well, for when you look at a federal agency, they are already consuming and using these technologies and devices. This is just another way of how to pay for that, right? And consume it. Then it's not something that they have to reinvent in their mind
Mm.
because they've been doing it for years and years and years, right? It's just another way of shifting the needle to an OpEx versus a CapEx with leveraging the cloud and cloud capabilities, right? But moving those applications and the data that's at low risk there, right, to that cloud, but then having the ability to have that more pertinent and secure data within your premises controlled by yourselves, right? As many a times there's outages at Microsoft, and we're a Microsoft 365 provider, right?
Mhm.
And it's a great product and we use it, and so do a lot of federal agencies. But there's a lot of times when and if there's an outage and you contact Microsoft and you say, well, when is it going to be fixed? And the answer is, we're working on it. We don't have a time just yet, right? That's a challenge. Whereas if you had that in your own environment, you would be able to give better answers to your stakeholders to say, hey, here's what we have identified. Here's the outage. Here's why it's happening. Here's what we're doing to resolve it. And here should be our turn back time, right? Where it's going to be back in the environment. That's a lot better than we're not sure yet. We're waiting on answers from our cloud provider.
Yeah, calling the cloud is not exactly like 1-800 cloud and someone picks up the phone and says,
Yeah.
"What's your problem today?"
Yeah.
All right. And, the reality is that there are third parties between federal agencies and the fundamental or the primary commercial cloud services providers.
Yep.
There's a lot of use for good reason of systems integrators, third parties that can do brokering, that can understand multiple cloud offerings and sort out what the different services are on behalf of the agency. Future tech helps in that link too, as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, the majority of the business that we do is to the federal systems integrator space, and we do that for a reason, right? We believe that they are the enablers, right, to help support the government. And if you look at, right, 90% of the outsourced contracts go to the federal systems integrators, right? The Northrop Grummans, the Lockheeds, the Boeings, the Raytheons, the Peritons, the L3 Harrises, those types of organizations, and they're built and architected to provide that great level of service and support to those agencies and take some of that risk away from them. And so we work with them a lot on making sure that the environment that they're providing as well is the most secure, risk averse, and has the best possibility for uptime, but also the ability to utilize CapEx and OpEx dollars to be able to drive that to the agencies as well.
Interesting. So the other type of choice besides your route to the cloud and to your hybrid environment is the choice of workloads, because that has an effect on what is the best choice of where things should run, especially with agencies having all of these legacy applications that still work. They still execute the logic, but they may not
Yes.
necessarily be cloud ready.
Enabled, yeah, cloud ready and cloud enabled, without a doubt. And so there's where hybrid needs to play a role, right? There are gonna be your COTS applications, right? Commercial off the shelf that will run fine, right, in cloud. But then there are gonna be those unique homegrown applications that just will not work, right? And so you still need an environment to support them, right? And support that application that is running something proprietary for one of the either federal agencies and or the systems integrators.
All right. And I guess the third question then to follow that is, what is the type of infrastructure setup you need to communicate among the cloud, among your data center? It's not just a simple Cat5 connection, is it?
Well, you know, at the end of the day, it's what, Cat 6, Cat 7, right? We've grown a
I'm
little
dating
bit.
myself. Yeah.
Yeah, you're dating. Now, if you would have said token ring, we would have had a problem, Tom, right? But no, it's definitely it's still just connectivity, right? When you look at it, connectivity is the key. Without connectivity, there is no cloud, right? Because you have to be able to get to the cloud to consume. And so, again, it's one of those things where you have to have very robust networks, right? To connected to the cloud to support the utilization of the applications, the data sets, right? Whatever the case may be. And so, you've got, if you look at networks now, right? 10 gig, 20 gig, 30 gig, right? You've got these incredible pipes now, right? That are out there, but those pipes are also at risk, right? If a pipe just goes down. And so what you need to make sure as an organization that you have redundant paths, right? And that's limiting you to a lot of the providers, right? You've got AT&T, you've got Sprint, you've got Verizon, right? These are the guys that have the halls, right? And you need to make sure that you've got redundant paths within those organizations. So that's a piece of making sure that your cloud journey is there, right? But also containerizing, right? The data and the cloud components that you would normally move, because you want to be able to do that from provider to provider. What's important is you don't want to be stuck in, I'm just an AWS house, right? And if something happens with AWS, how are you going to move your data, right? And your environment to Google. And if something at Google happens at Google, how are you going to move it to Azure, right? So you need to make sure that as much as you can containerize so that you're able to lift and shift, right, between each of those cloud providers to protect yourself.
Well, the purpose of infrastructure is to run software, and the purpose of running software is to deliver your mission. So if we look ahead to the future, and let's presume an agency is able to optimize the nature and the condition of its on-premises facilities, its data centers, and its approach to the cloud, and get all of that in balance, what could that mean for business and for their mission delivery?
Well, speed of delivery is a key component, right? And we talk to a lot of the systems integrators about that, right? Which is very important, which is speed to deliver for the mission. And, having modern systems will allow for that. Obviously, AI is going to play a tremendous role in supporting that speed of delivery and modernization. And so that's a whole new category that the world is trying to understand and adopt within their environment, and making sure that the proper guardrails are there, right, in support of it. The risk factor is that the bad actors don't care about the guardrails. So we've got to be very careful about what we give and when and how quick we give it. from an access perspective.
Bob Venero is the president and CEO of Future Tech Enterprise. Thanks so much for being with us.
Well, I appreciate your time today, Tom. Look forward to future segments.
All right. I'm Federal Drive host Tom Temin. Let's go back to the studio now for more on the Industry Exchange Cloud.